Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen,
merci de prendre place.
please be seated.
Alors, j'ai eu l'occasion de partager avec vous mon émotion d'être à la
I was
tribune du
able
Sénat
this morning
ce
to
matin.
share with you my emotion to be at the Speaker's pulpit here in the Senate as for a humble member of the National Assembly. That's a form of promotion almost. But now I've been elevated, literally, once more to chair a session at the Senate in the hemicycle, as we call it. For those of you who know Gérard Larcher, how talented he is, how grand he is, what a wonderful wonderful human being he is. I feel a heavy burden on my shoulders. I wish to pay tribute to him and share with you my feelings, my great emotion in investing this role today. The President of the Senate in France is second only to the President of the Republic in importance. In any case, it's my great pleasure to chair this second session on strategic autonomy. Before we pass the floor to Sophie Primas to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Pitron, I would like to say a few words to remind you that in the current geopolitical context, the EU's energy autonomy is no longer just a matter for the future. We have already seen that this morning. Rather, it is an objective of vital importance right now. It is becoming urgent to ensure security of supply in terms of fossil energies from third countries by reducing, in particular, our dependency on Russian gas, which had previously been growing. As we said this morning, this was discussed at great length at the Versailles summit last week, and yet the most sustainable and efficient response to this will be to diversify the EU's energy sources and to reduce our use of fossil energies. The EU, fortunately, has been ambitious in engaging in the energy transition. We'll be talking about that at the next Interparliamentary conference, organised by the National Assembly on the 21st of March. This very shortly. But decarbonising industry and transport and producing energy from renewable sources means using net technologies which themselves require rare metals, whether you're making solar panels, whether you're developing infrastructures for recharging or storage, or whether you're producing hydrogen by electrolysis. For the time being, we are not yet able to do without copper, aluminium, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earths. Our speaker this morning, Guillaume Pitron, is a journalist and author of The War for Rare Metals, The Hidden Face of the Energy Transition, will be alerting us to the issues raised by this increasing need for rare metals. Scarcity, of course, but also the global demand for them, which is growing exponentially. The second challenge, of course, is that supply comes mostly from outside Europe, in particular from China and Russia, and therefore subject to geopolitical vicissitudes, plus the conditions under which they are mined, which do not often meet European social, health or environmental standards. The French presidency thus wanted to put the strategic issue of EU's dependency on rare metals at the core of our debate. Now, it's not one that Europe has really worked on to date, and yet it is vital. It's crucial if we wish to become net zero by 2050 and bring to fruition our strategies on batteries, hydrogen, or integration of the community energy system, without, at the same time, being excessively dependent on third countries who could use these minerals as weapons in economic warfare or distort international competition. It's therefore a fundamental issue to make sure that the energy transition does not cause irreversible damage to the planet. What, therefore, will be our needs, and how can Europe meet those needs? Fundamentally, how can Europe become once more autonomy to some extent in this field? These are major questions that we need to work on together. For example, in France, we have two goals, which is to improve the recycling of the strategic materials, but also to further boost the potential for mining in France. We want to look at both these solutions at a greater scale. What deposits are there on our continent? How can we manage them smartly and abiding by the highest social, health and environmental standards? How can we develop a circular economy, optimizing European use of rare metals? Plenty of food for thought. And so, as I promised, I'm now going to pass the floor over to Sylvie Primat, who chairs the Economic Affairs Committee at the Senate, for an introductory speech. Thank you, Speaker. Colleagues, Russia's war in Ukraine has caused gas and oil prices to spike. It throws up the major problem of Europe's energy supplies. And I would welcome, therefore, the thinking and the goals set by the heads of state and government in Versailles last week concerning our dependency on Russian fossil fuels. What we're perhaps less aware of is that the war has caused the price of 3 metals from Russia also to spike, and yet they are vital for our industries, and in particular to make electric batteries. These products are aluminium, palladium and titanium. At a moment when Europe wants to step up the energy transition, this reminds us of the vulnerability brought about by that very transition when it comes to security of supply of rare metals. The Fit for 55 package sets the EU and its member states very ambitious decarbonisation objectives, which will be vital if we want to protect the climate and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2050. Indeed, it's one of the conditions for, one of the solutions to, ending our dependency on Russian hydrocarbon imports. So the eco-transition and strategic independence go hand in hand, and they will lead Europe prompt Europe to step up its efforts in favour of renewable energies. In this context, Fit for 55 and the EU sets forth a genuine revolution in the field of energy based around 3 planks. Production, first of all, with renewable energies, use by electrifying buildings, industry and transport, and storage with hydrogen. And yet, while the energy transition is vital, nonetheless, there is a hidden face, one which public debate is not aware of, which is our dependence on mining. The solar panels, our turbine blades, electric batteries, hydrogen electrolyzers, etc., all they require us to use rare metals, which are sources of emissions. They are imported and they're also expensive. Allow me to be very precise here to understand the issue. 15 grams of rare earths are present in any smartphone. 5 kilos are present in an electric battery, and 600 kilos of rare earths are present in an offshore wind turbine, which is quite some amount. In France, the French grid operator, RTE, assesses the annual need to import such minerals for our electrical system at up to 17 kilotons for rare earths, 70 kilotons for copper, 150 for aluminium, 1,700 for steel, and so on, while nuclear energy requires only 5 kilotons of uranium per year. It's obviously a major issue, and that is why myself and Roland Lescure wanted to debate it today. In this context, the European Union and its member states need to tackle 5 challenges which I put to you. The first is concerns price rises, because using rare metals brings with it the risk of inflation. For example, the price of copper has grown by 20%, the price of copper has grown by 70% in a year. Lithium has tripled in price over the last year. That's a cyclical change, but it could become a structural rise as we embark upon and engage in the energy transition. The second challenge is an rise in demand, which raises the issue of competition for access to resources, as Speaker Lescure said, and obvious risks of scarcity. Our need for copper could double. Our need for copper could triple. Our need for lithium could increase 42 times by 2030. The risk of scarcity exists for other rare metals, copper, aluminium, nickel, and some rare earths, such as neodymium. Now, the competition for these resources is a major an important geopolitical risk. Challenge 3 is our dependency on producing countries. Global production of rare metals is concentrated in a number of countries which don't necessarily abide by the same economic, social, and environmental standards as Europe. For example, 50% of copper comes from Chile and Peru, 40% of aluminium, 60% of rare earths comes from China, 50% of cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, not to mention Russia, which provides us with strategic metals such as aluminium, nickel, palladium, and titanium. Challenge number 4, negative externalities. The rare metals and their mining is the source of greenhouse gas emissions, of pollution for the environment, and damaging for local populations. For example, producing aluminium across the world represents alone 1% of greenhouse gas emissions. And the last and fifth challenge is a major one. It's that of the circular economy, because instead of rare metals, what we should be doing is to, rather than importing them, is to produce them in Europe, innovate to reduce the amount we use them, the amount of them we use, and develop recycling and better waste management. Electric batteries, only 10% are currently recycled. Now, this is a situation which may cause major upheavals in terms of geopolitics, and Europe is too far behind still, which is a paradox because our energy transition goals are the world's most ambitious. Yet, our mining policy is very underdeveloped. It's barely debated in national parliaments. Therefore, we need to wake up, and a change of policy is absolutely vital. That's why the Senate's Economic Affairs Committee, which I chair, has adopted a goal for mining sovereignty and in the context of the most recent law called climate resilience, which was adopted in France in 2021. In order to make this change and identify and protect against mining dependency in the energy transition, I think we need to talk about a number of developments. First of all, we could supplement European national strategies to favour security of supply of strategic metals in order to identify critical metals, producing companies, economic cost, and the carbon impact. Secondly, we need to support mining projects to relocate value chains when it comes to mining and conversion of metals, but also collection and recycling of waste. And to do that, we could enhance budgetary and tax support for these projects. As the Commissioner said this morning, a toolbox could be implemented at European Union level to support member states. Lastly, I think mining needs to be considered one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. It's an imperative in sustainable development. It necessitates local ecosystems and the circular economy. That's why the concept of the sustainable mine should be promoted in European standards and labels. A bit of food for thought to kick you off with is what I wanted to give you, but I'm very happy to have Guillaume Pitron with us. Shan't go through his entire CV again, but a number of his works have been translated into different languages. They are the fruit of 10 years of work. You highlight the environmental challenges linked to the energy transition, and particularly on rare metals. And I think your speech this morning will be a very valuable source of input for us. Thank you in advance. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Sophie. Apparently, I'm allowed to applaud as well, so I will. Thank you very much for those words. Mr. Pitron, welcome to you. Now, I'm going to give you the floor without further ado. You are the author of The Rare Metals War, The Hidden Face of the Energy and Digital Transition. You're a journalist, and if you were not here earlier, we have a member of the Assembly who's already brandished a copy of your book. You may have seen. The floor is yours. Thank you, speakers, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, this is a great honour to speak at the Senate on this Interparliamentary Conference on the EU's strategic autonomy, on a subject which I believe will be a huge economic, geopolitical and environmental challenge for the next 30 years. I'm a journalist, has been said, but I'm out in the field. I've travelled across 4 continents for many years now, trying to understand the challenges brought about by a greener world. As I say, a low-carbon or a zero-carbon world in which we need less coal, less oil, is basically a world of metals. Abundant metals, so things like copper, which we'll need for the energy transition. 16 tons of copper are needed for a wind turbine because it has to be connected to the grid. But you also need lots of copper for an electric car. Indeed, 4 times more copper for an electric car than for a conventional car. And in the energy transition, the low-carbon world will also be a world of rare metals as well as abundant metals. Now, rare metals because they are rarer than abundant metals, and they are also diluted in their concentrations. They're found in various places around the world, but they're harder to mine. And these are often therefore called critical metals because there is a risk of scarcity because they are concentrated in certain areas of the globe, such as South Africa, Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, but also China, as has been said, Russia as well for palladium. Now, Europe has indeed has a list. It's had one since 2011 of critical metals. There are around 30 or so on that list, including lithium, cobalt, palladium, as well as indium, gallium, rather exotically named metals, and as you've said, rare metals, in particular, lots of neodymium, which you have in your smartphone, but also in the engines of the motors of electric cars, which is also a critical metal.
So the US, just a couple of weeks ago, have updated their list of critical metals, and so now they have listed 50 raw materials, mineral raw materials. So just to show you the inflation of these raw materials, which are now on these lists. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has never featured in the Paris Agreement. If you read the agreement, not for 1 second is there a mention of metals, mining resources, mines, etc., etc. And the issue is, so where are we going to get these metals from? And what about the cost for the environment? Are there any winners or losers on this scenario, just as we had in terms of oil? And so this is where we need to look at the strategic challenges of these rare metals. And so for many years, I went to mines of rare materials, a graphite mine, for example, in China. And what you can see over there is absolutely terrifying. We have metals that are refined in conditions which really do not respect the environment on man. The waste is just thrown directly onto the environment. Also, there are various diseases that have emerged, particularly concerning bones. Their bones are more brittle now. So these are official sources that state this. And also, a Chinese specialist once told me China has sacrificed its environment to provide rare metals for the rest of the year. So we don't really know an awful lot about this because we don't have any mines, and Deputy this morning mentioned this. We have these mines and refining facilities, but we decided to delocalize this, and so we also delocalized the pollution from these metals, and we've also delocalized technology for green technology. And this is now borne by other countries, and we're not aware of this type of pollution because pollution is very far from us, and it's invisible. It's been made invisible. So I'm sorry to say this in such a frank manner, but this is so the world of energy transition is made up of dirty worlds and clean worlds. So this is an economic challenge because we are transferring these activities to other countries like China is a leader in rare materials. So China has become a huge major producer of these raw materials, and so these are strategic. So they've now become the Saudi Arabia of rare metals, and so of course they're not going to sell it at €1 a kilo. They will sell us the magnets, the electric cars, wind turbines, particularly for silicon. So they want to send the metal with added value so that it's good for their trade balance. So we have become much more dependent on China, much more so than we are on Russian oil. And so there's also a geopolitical challenge. Where are we going to get these raw materials from? How can we secure these resources in the future, whether this is for Europe, but also for China, which doesn't have all the rare materials? So this is why China is very present in Africa, and I'm thinking particularly in the Democratic Republic of China, because this is where they extract cobalt, which is critical and strategic. This green world, which I could talk about for hours, this is a hidden aspect. There's a risk, of course, ladies and gentlemen, that we do not resolve this challenge of the thermo-industrial age, but perhaps we are moving this further away. We are moving away from these mines of strategic metals. So we have economic, environmental, and other challenges as well. And yet this transition has to take place. And so that it's successful, I think that we have to talk about the 2.0 transition. 2.0 transition. This is about the Paris agreements, the summit in Bourget. People cried, laughed, etc. So this is 1.0 transition. But at that time, people weren't aware that there would be more demand for these rare metals. So the transition 2.0 is necessary so that this transition can take place. And of course, this requires knowledge of the ecological truth of technologies. We have to analyze the life cycle, and the general public has to be aware of these particular challenges, and so that they can put figures and images to this delocalized pollution that has been made invisible. I also think, and this is something which concerns the different sources and the ethical supply chains, so that companies, for example, so that we can better investigate the supply chain and go back to and trace the minerals, find out where they come from. So I also think that we should need to act on our industry to handle resources better. The circular economy needs to be developed. So the real challenge of the 20th century, ladies and gentlemen, is the circular economy. It's not a greener world. It is the circular world. The circular world is much more difficult to implement than a greener world, because the world is not automatically circular. So this means all the different stakeholders in the loop have to speak to each other, and the circular economy is about cooperation, solidarity, so that the co-designers speak to each other. We talk to the recyclers, and so that all the different players in this chain can work together better and also optimize the resources that they have. And of course, we need to develop mineral diplomacy, and people are working on this through the European. There's a raw material dialogue taking place between Europe and Latin America, and this is done once a week, particularly in Latin America. And we discuss with those countries to see what they can provide in terms of raw materials, so that we can diversify the supply chain. And then I think that we have to open mines in Europe. And so we have to do this not just for sovereignty reasons, but also for reasons of ecology. And so I think that it would be cleaner to have mines in Europe than to allow the Chinese to extract these rare earth materials. But having mines in Europe is perhaps not the best environmental decision, because we will be sovereign in terms of supplies, but we will also be sovereign in terms of ecology. We will have reached environmental sovereignty. And so I really do believe in this concept. So our ecological performance will not be indexed to the performance of the Chinese or South Americans or others, South Africans, excuse me. So we have to solve these issues. Sometimes I wonder, when I talk about this, are we allowing this problem to be solved by the very way it was created? So I think that we need that the exchanges we have to take, talking about sovereignty in terms of supply. This is a very new term in terms of our debates. So we have to think differently, talk about the logic behind the different sectors, from the mine right to the raw material, up to the finished product. And this is what the Chinese have been doing doing for about 30 years now. We have to have a long time cycle. So China has the time. So do we have the time? So do we have enough time to identify all the different challenges in the long term of regeneration? I also think we have to accept that we will have to pay the right price for metals. This price is underestimated in terms of the negative externalities, and this isn't integrated into the final price. So I think that we need to get used to the idea that a greener world is a more expensive world, and so we'll have to pay a higher price in order to integrate these negative externalities. So I'd like to finish on a positive note. A discussion with an international player said, well, at the end of the day, we don't really have a problem with critical raw materials, but we have a problem of grey matter. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this presentation, which was very enthusiastic, and but it wasn't very optimistic apart from the ending note. But so there was a note of hope. So, dear colleagues, there are a number of you who signed up to speak. So we're going to have to limit the time slot for each person to 2 minutes. So I really want to use this torture instrument, which allows me to remind you if you go over time. So let's say 2 minutes, 10 seconds, and so I'm sure I will have to. So if I do tap on the microphone with this ruler, don't take it personally. So this will allow us to stick to time, and so time and finish in time for lunch. So each time, as Madame Prima said this morning, I'll announce the first 2 speakers, so that the first speaker can speak and the second can prepare. So we're going to start with Mr. Costel Nicolae Dunava from Romania, and then Mr. Albert Vicaire can get ready to speak. Mr. Dunava, please.
Monsieur Dunava n'est pas là.
He's not here, Mr. Dunava. So, yes, do I speak from here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing times when you should be prepared to respond to unexpected disruptions in a sufficiently flexible and timely manner. The need for planning for future crises has quickly become apparent. Despite Europe's significant mineral resources and know-how, it can find itself in situations of dependency. Dear colleagues, at the European level, we must ensure compliance with environmental and social standards in the field of raw materials through various instruments, such as ensuring external supply, recycling, innovation and efforts to reduce consumption, and developing internal production. At Union level, actions such as alliances, important projects of common European interest, and task forces need to be continued, developed and strengthened in vulnerable sectors, starting with health and critical raw materials. At the same time, the alliances formed must be as inclusive as possible, so ASU can benefit from the strengths that each member state can bring in critical value chain. Romania has a considerable potential in the field of raw materials. My country is well placed to contribute to the increase of the reserves of critical raw materials. Having all that in mind, we support the development of financial support measures for investments and the creation of a bridge fund to reduce project risk and support small and medium-sized enterprises in the sector or the implementation of an important projects of common European interest in raw materials. At the same time, it is beneficial to facilitate access to the best operating technologies for raw materials that are in line with environmental requirements and to facilitate access to specialized advice. However, compliance with the standards can be prohibitive for an overwhelming number of European small and medium-sized enterprises, and apparently there is a lack of awareness regarding the importance of standards in their economic activities. In this regard, one of our utmost priorities should be ensuring a stable and predictable regulatory framework in this area. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So before we hand the floor to Mr. Vicaire, So perhaps you can say that the images that you can see on the screens will also be available if you want to download these so that you can publish them on the site of the Interparliamentary Conference. So you'll be sent the link a bit later on in the day. Before I hand over to Mr. Vicaire, Mr. Montaugé should prepare himself. Thank you, President, dear colleagues. So on the front of the mairie in Brest, it says rather be poor than be serf. And so paradoxically, the people of Brest are quite rich as it happens. So our society has been built on the fact that energy is cheap. And so as an engineer, this reality, with all the different constraints, geological constraints imposed by the planet, is the very essence of my investment and political commitment. So I would like to go over a quite simple concept, which is the concept of the SBL megawatt. And I would like to say that we need three things, essentially, in order to succeed in terms of this energy transition. First of all, a low-carbon situation. Let's look what the best countries in Europe are doing. For example, Denmark, with heat networks, with public transport which is efficient, with demand for energy which is aligned with energy production. So I think that Denmark is shown as a way forward, so that we can reduce by 30–40% our current consumption of energy. And then efficiency. So it's up to us as politicians to set the standards so that the products that we use and the way in which we produce energy, so that the way in which we use that energy that's produced, so that it has to be carbon neutral and exclusively European, or if possible, exclusively European. And then finally, energy. The third point in terms of megawatts is renewables. So you can see my sticker, no to nuclear. So we are meeting this chamber to, we should listen to the Cour des Comptes, so rather. So renewables then. Those will be key in terms of becoming independent in terms of energy. Thank you.
Madame Lotta Olsen se prépare. La parole est à
Madame Lotta Olsen, the floor goes to Franck Montaugé. Thank you, Mr. President, President of the Senate Committee. So mining is crucial so that the European Union achieves carbon neutrality by 2015. And so the invasion of Ukraine shows our vulnerability, and it places our economies in a kind of oil shock situation, and also highlights our vulnerabilities. The European Union does it have a strategy in this particular respect, apart from what we've seen on the internal electricity market, which is also under pressure due to the hike in prices of oil and gas? And I regret the absence of the commissioner in charge of these matters. He would have been able to reply to that. In terms of the green taxonomy, classes nuclear as a non-sustainable source of energy. We may have doubts about this. Now, in terms of the objective 50-50, fit for 50-50, I regret that hydrogen and nuclear don't have the technological neutrality compared to other low-carbon sources of energy. I also regret that the alternatives to Russian gas, such as biogas and liquid natural gas, are not really taken into account, especially in texts on renewable energies or charging infrastructure. And above all, I've seen that the gas package needs to be reviewed, and so that we can draw lessons from the Russian-Ukrainian crisis, because in terms of security of supply, this is too limited. I hope that the European market of lessons, I'd like us to review the marginal costs and which links the price of electricity to gas. This has to be reviewed. We have to act urgently without waiting for April and the announcements of a report on electricity. Finally, I hope that the current crisis will be the opportunity to take stock of the liberalization of the electricity sector, and I hope that this will be the benefit to the consumer in terms of the price and the quality of service. So we have to secure supply now at a cost which is acceptable for the consumer. And energy operators should open various concessions. Thank you.
Merci. Monsieur Erkens se prépare et la parole est à Madame
So Mr. Erkens now goes to Madame Lotta Olsson from Sweden.
And for a well-organized conference. These topics we are discussing are a very important issue. To strengthen the EU strategic and autonomy is now even more tangible and important than before. The green transformation will require increased innovation and the use of new technologies, and therefore important that we are aware of the vulnerability of the supply of rare earth metals. To strengthen the European industry and economy, it's also crucial from a term of security. We all see the happening right now about the invasion of Ukraine. From the Swedish part, it's important to contribute as much as we can and at the same time obtain an environmental consideration. Always today, Sweden accounts for 93% of all iron which are produced in EU. In one of our state-owned companies, we now started the REMAP, recycling of mining waste from critical raw materials. Based on this process, we can extract 5 times the need for phosphor, 100% of our plaster need, and to contribute our collant resistant. In addition, mining waste from just our iron or waste, Sweden stands for 30% of the iron EU needs to rare earth metal, which is needed in magnets, wind and solar power, electric cars, and so on. And now I have to stop. So from Sweden, we're also looking forward to arrange the conference next spring 2023 in Stockholm during the Swedish Parliamentary. Thank you all most, and we very welcome.
Thank you. Monsieur Karitsis se prépare. La parole est à Silvio Erkens pour les
Karitsis, you
Pays-Bas.
should get ready to speak, but the next speaker is Mr. Silvio.
Painfully showcases our dependency on Russia for oil, resources, and other energy sources. It illustrates our dependency that has made us vulnerable and therefore weak in the global political arena. We need to shake off this weakness, as it is a self-inflicted weakness. The energy transition offers us the opportunity to become more self-sufficient, to shake off this weakness and this dependency on countries that are not our friends, but our rivals often. The energy transition allows us to reduce the dependency, to green our economies, to become a hub of innovation, and also a beacon of freedom in an unsafe world. The energy transition requires political leadership. Leadership to move fast and take risks, but also leadership in not excluding the technologies we need for this transition. This means investing in wind, solar, nuclear, geothermal, biogas. We need all of it. And the stakes are too high to play political games or bicker about it. When it comes to rare metals and other minerals, we need to take urgent action as well. We cannot remain dependent on Russia, on China, or on others for the key ingredients we need for a successful energy transition. To reduce this dependency, we need to overcome our reluctance towards the mining industry. We need to get our hands dirty again. We can, after all, extract these resources in the European Union in a way that has better labor, environmental, and safety standards than anywhere else in the world. And the policies that are required for this need to be put in place as soon as possible. On top of this, we need the incentives and policies for investing more in circularity. Reusing lithium from used car batteries is better than importing it. And that also means not exporting all our high-value waste products anymore. We need it for our circular economy and also for our energy security. So we can reduce the dependency on unfriendly countries, colleagues. We can reduce the weakness that has afflicted us for decades. And we cannot let this historic opportunity pass. Let's move past speeches and words and act fast to put these ambitions into actions the coming months as member states together with the European Commission. Let's show leadership and let's show our rivals our true strength. Thank you.
Thank you. Monsieur Moniz du Portugal se prépare. La
Mr.
parole est à
Moniz
Alexandros Karitsis pour la
Portugal, get
Grèce.
ready. We now have Mr. Alexandros Karitsis for Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be very, very brief. I think this is a very interesting discussion that we are having, and thanks to your speech about scarcity, about dependency, about circular economy, about waste disposal, and this is a discussion that will remain with us for the years to come. And of course, we expect that Europe remains in the forefront of this international debate on how this green transition project remains a very important cornerstone of our policy. But having said that, I think that we should not distract ourselves from the main question that we currently face today. And that question is no other than energy pricing. At the moment, the European economy is facing an existential danger with energy pricing, which has spiked, which has moved beyond any reasonable level that we experienced in the past. And this is something that all countries are facing. Some countries, like my country in Greece, it's even greater, the danger. So we need a strategy there. And we don't see a strategy at the moment. And maybe the Commission should be here to answer this, this question. Last week in Versailles, in the meeting of the 27 leaders, there was a discussion about Eurobonds. We don't see anything coming out of that. This is a discussion we should have. This is a strategy that we should create in order to try and control this pricing issue that creates a very, very important danger, not just to the energy sector, but to the European economy as a whole. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you.
Mr. Ledin is getting ready. La parole est à Paolo
Mr. Ledin, prepare to speak after Mr. Moniz, who's next.
Dear President, distinguished President, dear colleagues, I bring here the problem of the islands and the outermost regions in Europe. We are a reality which is very difficult to implement any independence and autonomy in the energy sector. Rather than other countries, we are not able to interconnect our grids, and therefore we must develop systems that can balance the production of renewable energy, which by its nature is volatile, and therefore we need strongly to invest on storage strategies so we can afford to guarantee the continuity of the supplying. Furthermore, on the highlands contest, and this is a very important issue that is not being, at least I don't see being addressed properly on our discussion. In the islands, we also have the problem of the environment. I can tell you, for instance, in Açores, we have probably on the deep sea one of the most rich exits of precious metals in Europe. We are being very concerned about the way this can be the mining on the deep sea around the Azores, not only for the environment issues, but the sovereignty issues. And this kind of richness must also benefit the populations that, of course, are near to that deep sea richness. This is something that Europe does not pay the right attention for the islands challenge. It's not only Portugal that has islands and outermost regions, also Spain and even France also have. So I appeal for our discussion and our strategic thought to take in consideration this huge challenge that the islands on the energetic sector is for all of us, And if we want to keep Europe as a union, we cannot afford to forget the islands. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Brian Ledden, Ireland.
Mr. Brian Ledden from Ireland.
Mr. Chairman, earlier Madame Primas and Monsieur Priton outlined clearly how the demand for rare metals is set to increase radically as we electrify various sectors of our economy. And they outlined the human and ecological impact in addition to the economic challenge. I don't proclaim to be an expert on rare metals, and I am indeed looking forward to reading Monsieur Priton's book. But this challenge that we have in rare metals outlined by our guest and those who spoke before me underscores the importance of managing energy demand. I spoke of this in the previous session, and while Commissioner Breton agreed that we must be thrifty with our energy, this seems like a great understatement, and that we are not taking demand management as seriously as we should. Much of the energy that we generate via fossil fuels, nuclear or renewable energy, and that we consume, does little useful work. This is particularly so in transport and in heating. In transport, we seem blind to the fact that cars, including electric cars, are inherently inefficient. Most of the energy in the fuel tank or in the battery, up to 90%, is used to carry the machine rather than the occupants. The most efficient electric vehicles are smaller and lighter ones. And if we must promote electric vehicles, then we must encourage these and very much discourage the heavier and larger models. And we must have a modal shift away from the private car altogether, because that is the most efficient transport policy. If we don't do this, firstly, we are burning money, and we are also making the energy transition even more difficult, as we will be required to build greater generation capacity, and we will become more dependent on rare metals. I agree with previous speakers. The EU taxonomy is flawed. It is blind to the real possibility and necessity to use precious energy in a much better way. It represents a slower path to decarbonisation than is possible, in addition to the challenges such as the one in rare metals. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you kindly.
Monsieur Rybarski va se préparer.
Mr. Rybarski is going to get ready, and Mr. Pavic has the floor next, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Critical minerals have not been explored or exploited in the Republic of Croatia since the late 1960s, but our potential lies in barytes, natural graphite, and bauxite. We are aware that as a state, together with the European Union, we need to invest additional efforts and resources in the revitalization of mining. We need alternative sources of supplies, as well as closer partnerships among stakeholders dealing with critical raw materials. The diversification of external sources of supply and the fight against trade restrictions on raw materials have the potential to develop a quality EU policy. We support proposals to provide EU support and funding for the technological development of critical raw materials, with particular emphasis on the need for specific financial instruments and targeted research and innovation funds for recycling processes. I would also like to point out that regarding the semiconductors, Croatia sees the strengthening of cooperation with South Korea, Taiwan, and the United States as a short-term solution. In the long run, the EU will have to work on strengthening its production capacity, and in this context, we welcome the adjustment of the state aid framework to support strategic autonomy. We also have to look at other potentials which are not dependent on the exploitation of rare metals. These are, for example, the use of hemp for the production of powerful batteries, in line with the US and Canadian researches. Thank you for your attention.
Merci. Madame Soumelzo se prépare et la parole est à Radosław
Soumelzo should get ready to speak after Mr. Rybarski, who's next for Bulgaria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'll start my speech mentioning that a recent study of the International Energy Agency, based on data from 2021, that an average electric vehicle requires 6 times more minerals resources than a conventional combustion engine vehicle, while a wind energy plant requires 9 times more metals than an average gas-fired energy plant. Based on these figures, we could only conclude that 1 megawatt from a renewable energy unit will need at least 50% more resources compared to what it needed back in 2010. Reviewing the figures, furthermore, we should know that the clean energy technologies will be increasing the demand of copper by 40%, while the demand for lithium and cobalt will increase by 70% and 90%, respectively. There are other countries rich in rare earths, such as Russia, South Africa, Peru, Australia, and India. However, most of these countries are considered as emerging markets for these materials, which means that developed economies will depend at a large extent to these not well-regulated and in most cases politically unstable markets, characterized by poor labor conditions. On the territory of Republic of Bulgaria, in the continental shelf and in the exclusive economic zone in the Black Sea, there are no registered deposits of rare earth materials. However, Bulgaria is the fourth in the EU producer and exporter of refined copper, and more deposits are still to be explored. So in order to move forward, we have to make clear that the transition to clear energy will require significant amounts of resources, including the rare earth materials. Clear potential for the exploration of such resources in the EU do exist, and it should be a subject to systematic research, as it could eventually improve the security of supplies to key production sectors. A significant role in the process has the development of the mining sector and applicable EU regulations and strategies for the public awareness of this issue. In order to conclude, we shall all agree on the fact that coordinated approach at EU level is a key aspect to success due to inevitable reality that each country cannot deal with these challenges on its own. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Nardi se prépare. La parole est à Madame Susanna Soumelzo pour le Congrès.
So, Madame Soumelzo for the Congress of Deputies says, thank you very much. Chairman, first of all, we'd like to congratulate the French presidency for organizing these days and also the participation of national parliaments on themes that are so important, such as the theme that we're dealing with this morning, such as energy, which has been impacted by the terrible invasion by Putin in Ukraine. So Europe needs to act urgently in order to protect the companies and the citizens in terms of the energy crisis we are now witnessing. And we have two major problems in terms of energy. This already pre-existed, so the increase of electricity prices, and also because these are linked to the gas prices. In terms of member states, we have acted to amortize the crisis due to this price hike with temporary measures, extraordinary measures as well. But throughout this time, we've seen an absence of response based on three premises. So the short length of this crisis and the self-regulation of the market, and also national budgets in order to bear this crisis. Also, there's a loss of competitiveness in terms of European industry, and inflation has risen, and there have been social impacts of this, and there's a serious risk of bringing into question the green agenda. So, citizens are wondering who and when and where the money is going in terms of what they're paying for their gas and electricity. And for this reason, we think that in Spain, this situation requires urgent solutions, extraordinary solutions, and also innovative ones. So we would like to have a debate at European level in order to reach agreements and consensus. We should avoid situations which distort the market, and perhaps we should review the question of linking gas prices to electricity goods. We need a centralized mechanism for buying natural gas. In Spain, we would like to see a speeding up of the ecological transition and to move towards a low-carbon situation, which will also create sustainable jobs. All this is because we need to put the citizen at the very heart of our strategies. Thank you.
Merci. Alors, c'est Jeanne.
Thank you. Jeanne Navantis should be prepared. And so thank you, President. I would also thank you for the different contradictions on the green transition, which led to some kind of hypocrisy in terms of our discussions. Contradictions which allow us to face this major question, which, of course, it is quite clear that we want, and we really do want to move towards a greener world with less pollution. But on the other side, we're also aware of the difficulty that has been expressed today very clearly, and that is the question of the critical nature of materials, the inflationary risk due to hiking prices, the risk of shortages as well, which is a major issue, the dependence on countries outside Europe, and so also the response. So we do need to have this circular economy to develop good practices and also put into place a series of policies which highlight this possibility of developing the circular economy. Italy is very strong in terms of waste. It has a huge capacity to collect waste from the kinds, but it would be we should limit through various policies the export of this waste to countries outside Europe, and perhaps we should encourage this waste to stay in Europe for recycling purposes. And so we need to intervene on two things, and so we need to do this very quickly. First, we need to decouple electricity and gas in terms of the electricity bill. That's another major issue. And we also need to work on storage and purchases, as the Commissioner said. But of course, we do need to work in the midterm as well. And so we are aware of so I think that Italy, for example, has opened up a new process, which is called the super bonus. This is to make things more efficient. So for our companies, for our houses, to make them consume less energy. Thank you.
Monsieur, on peut l'applaudir, effectivement. Grazie mille. Monsieur Arvanidis va se préparer et je passe la parole à
Mr. Arvanidis is going to prepare to speak.
Dear friends, we discuss about rare metals, but I want open discussion a little. Most important issue is that European Union is independent in energy in future. We need more nuclear energy, we need solar energy, renewable energy and new technology. It's important we understand what kind of energy resource we have and is available in different parts of Europe. For example, in northern part of Europe, forest energy, biomass, is profound part of energy system. Now it's right time to understanding. If we cut a tree, we plant always a new one. It's good system. Finnish speciality is heat energy. Heat energy is peat energy. It's important also to food production. In Finland, we had before a political plan to reduce peat production to energy. I wasn't agree with that idea. And now, because of Ukraine war situation is now totally different. I hope that all possibilities in energy in every country will be evaluated, including peat energy. And in the end, it's important that we are united. We manage together. Now it's time to come back basics in European Union. Safety, energy, food first. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Georgios Arvanitidis, followed by Mr. Oprea for Romania. Georgios first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dear colleagues, we must remember that the EU started as an energy union of coal and steel. Carbon united us. The decarbonization will reunite us more closely. We need to devise a new strategy of energy autonomy. Renewable energy is our first priority to address the current crisis. It is the keystone to reducing the energy prices and become autonomous. Of course, lithium and cobalt is needed to build a solar panel or a wind turbine or a battery, although we must ensure that all this is done in terms of social and environmental responsibility. However, once the panel is made and installed, the process is complete. It will be there for a quarter of a century, and the sun will provide energy simply by rising. Switching to solar and wind energy will not only stop the release of carbon into the atmosphere, but also save money. With this renewable energy model, our world will be more democratic because the participants in the productive model will be potentially all. Such changes in the production model pose a very important social challenge. With this transition must be fair and leaves no one behind. We agree with the new proposed toolkit of European Commission. The issuance of Eurobond, when it was proposed by Greece during the fiscal crisis, was a taboo for EU. Now the issuing of a Eurobond for the purchase of energy by all member states is on the table. It is not just a matter of historical and political justification of our proposal. It is an existential issue of the EU itself on how to cope with the talents ahead. We must go through this path. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Stefan Radu Oprea for Romania, followed by Mark de Mesmaeker, Belgium.
We've been taken by surprise several times recently. Firstly, we've been taken by surprise by the COVID pandemic, which revealed the fragility of our supply chains. We are exporting a reduced quantity of rare metals in Europe, and this is affecting the possibility to maintain the jobs in the EU. Thus, it's time to act. We must decide regarding the future of mining in Europe. For instance, Romania is a country with resources including graphite and rare metals. In our opinion, we should concentrate to improve the mining technologies that will allow us to be climate friendly. We do not have to give up on our values, but we must find the right balance between jobs, offering the best social protection, and the green future. Secondly, we've been taken by surprise by the rise of energy prices. Initially, you promote solutions which didn't interfere with the market, but tried to protect the vulnerable consumers. Nonetheless, what should be done when the entire middle class, SMEs and other companies become vulnerable consumers? Just to take money from one pocket and move it to another one doesn't mean that we solve the problem. The member states' budgets are not limitless. Therefore, you should take courageous structural measures which should solve the causes, not just to apply bandages on the effects. A social survey showed that 96% of the Romanians are worried about the huge values of gas and energy invoices. Today, the prices in Romania are kept, But the national budget is on big pressure and is not possible to support the same aid scheme till the end of the year. The biggest threat is the unpredictability of energy and gas prices due to the war next to our border. What is to be done? EU should take in consideration the energy mix of each member state to provide the quickest supply answer. By way of illustration, in Romania, 20% of electrical energy is provided by coal. We should be able to use coal in producing energy for a period which will allow us to put in production new renewable gas and nuclear capacities, taking into consideration that coal ensures energy security because it allows raising immediately the production capacity if necessary. With this, we are just buying time, and we have to use it wisely. Moreover, we should invest also in energy efficiency. It's not a big part of, if not a big part of the new energy that will be produced will be wasted. Finally, the value of investment in energy efficiency should not be included in the budgetary deficit. This will be the nudge that member states are expecting to invest more in this respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madame Higgins is getting ready. Et la parole est à Mark Demesmaeker pour la Belgique.
Mark Demesmaeker, Belgium.
Order first, in the speakers list, my name or my political affiliation is referred to as ID. This is not correct. I have to point that out. It's a quite annoying mistake and a sensitive issue for me, so this is a mistake in the list. Anyway, that being said, well, we all suddenly realize that that energy can be used as a geopolitical weapon, and maybe that we have been sleepwalking too long in the European Union. And it has been said before, a crisis can be a moment where sudden change and drastic change is possible. And for me, that means getting away from Russian fossil fuels much faster, and all fossil fuels for that matter, diversifying, investing in energy efficiency, in renewables, hydrogen solutions, and also in the nuclear option. And I know that in a number of countries, including my own, this option is still controversial, but I am convinced that we have to invest in its future, in research and development. My country has a world-renowned research center. Let's share this know-how and encourage and finance research. As for the case of rare metals, two things maybe. I think it's important that we encourage research with the aim of reducing or even eliminating the use of rare earth metals. Such research financed with EU funds in the wind energy sector is already yielding results. It's one way to go. Secondly, our motto should be circularity first. The development in the EU of circular economy must be smarter, must be faster, and it is possible. My country, Flanders and Belgium, is a front runner in Europe in urban mining. It is a mine that is there that we can mine, with record figures in collection of batteries, electronics, with collection schemes for electronic waste, and another one for batteries, funded by consumers and producers. That's what we need. One figure to illustrate. 74% of used batteries in Belgium are sorted and returned to a collection point. We significantly exceed European objectives. Why I'm telling that? Because during my time as an MEP in the European Parliament, I was rapporteur on the circular economy package, several files. And my frustration was that not the Parliament was ambitious enough, but that a number of our member states were reluctant to scale up their efforts and to set the highest ambitions. And I think that is still a problem and work for us to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Otto, pour la Finlande se prépare. La parole est à
Mr. Otto, get ready for Finland, but the floor is now for Alice Murray Higgins, please.
Friends, I would like to thank the Senate for hosting us, and also to thank Mr. Breton, what I think is a very important reminder that the climate and our precious minerals do not exist within the economy. Rather, they are the planetary boundary, the atmosphere around us, the ground beneath us, within which our economy must constrain itself and exist. Indeed, the only possible economy, which must be a circular economy with renewable energy. And in this context, we have to look and be very clear and honest about when we move away from oil and gas, that we do not substitute with further fossil fuels. I'm part of the Future of Europe process, and in that process, the citizens before the crisis, where Russia has now deplorably invaded Ukraine, they called for Europe to have independence from oil and gas by investing in renewable, in green energy, and indeed in hydrocarbon. In this context as well, those citizens have called for stronger supply chain rules. They want ethical, environmental and social information in all of what we do in terms of internal markets and imports. But unfortunately, the current draft EU law on due diligence and supply chain is inadequate. It falls short, with 99% of businesses exempt, and with loopholes that shift liability and which also limit the local access to justice for communities around the world who supply our supply chains. If we are serious on ethics, we must address and strengthen this law and ensure all Scope 3 emissions are counted. An elephant in the room, which we must also address, as we try to make the best decisions for Europe and for our countries on energy, is the Energy Charter Treaty. We cannot afford to have making of policy decisions on the best energy, the crucial issue, limited by the threat of investor-state dispute mechanisms and the threat that individual companies could indeed interfere or limit the power to make the necessary decisions. This is something we have to be honest in addressing. Again, I thank all of you for the opportunity to contribute today.
Thank you very much. Alors, notre dernier orateur.
Last speaker this morning will be Oliveira, but before that, Heikki Otto for Finland.
Dear colleagues, I come from the Finnish Lapland, the northernmost region of the European Union. Lapland is known for the Europeans for beautiful nature and the northern lights. Lapland may be less well known for the natural resources, mining, and many industries which are in great importance for the European economy. In Finnish and also Swedish Lapland, we can find the materials with strategic meaning for the European industries. So the northernmost regions have a great potential to provide the European Union with strengthening industrial base to achieve the clean transformation in our economies and independence from Russia and China. That's why we need to take care of the competitiveness of these regions. There are 2 points I would want to emphasize at this time. We don't want to see the European Union to limit the use of our local natural resources. We emphasize the importance of the subsidiarity principle in the decision-making. We who live there know the best how at the same time to protect the nature and the biodiversity and how to utilize the resources in a sustainable way. The European Commission can count on us on this. Dear colleagues, maximizing the European security is now very, very important. And for example, in Finland, there is currently being discussed whether to join NATO. I see that it might be a good move for all the European Union members to join NATO. We need a competitive, powerful, and united European Union that can lead the way for freedom, democracy, human rights, and sustainable development in the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you. Et alors, pour terminer,
last but not least, Jorge Barry Oliveira for Portugal.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, the war in Ukraine has exposed that our excessive dependency on Russian energy is the result of our distraction from energy security. I would like to take this opportunity to remind you that Portugal and Spain can be an alternative solution to solve the gas supply in Europe and to reduce imports from Russia. Portugal and Spain have conditions that allow them to receive the gas that Europe needs, coming from African countries and the United States of America by sea. The problem is getting it to France and then getting it to the rest of Europe. But this problem can be overcome if within the European framework we find solutions that increase the interconnections between Portugal and Spain with the rest of Europe. A topic that, as we know, is already old and has been dragged on for a long time. This is a good time. This is a good time to return to this discussion, and it is the challenge that I leave here to my dear colleagues. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Avant de repasser la parole
Before I fall back to Mr. Pitron, so to thank you all for all your discipline, for sticking to the allotted speaking time. And certainly, I don't know about the Senate in France, but certainly at the Economic Affairs Committee in the French National Assembly, I have to knock my ruler on the microphone a bit more often than I have this morning. So thank you much. Many of you have thanked the French presidency as well for organising today's session. So in fact, I would thank you. I thank those who worked behind the scenes and made this a reality. So all the civil servants and the officials working for the Senate, and Sylvie Primat, of course, chairwoman of the Senate Economic Affairs Committee. Thank you all for your hard work. Right, Mr. Pitron, I don't know if you wish to say a few words in response to one of the many, some or all of the many points raised. You may do so from the podium if you wish. Chairman, Chairwoman, parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this very detailed. How long have I got? 2.5 hours? 15 minutes, right? Okay, I shall be as quick as I can. Right, 10 to 15 minutes. I shall be as brief as I can. And many things have been said. I'll try and go through them by topic. First of all, one thing was said by Mr. Arvalitidis from Greece, and it's important to repeat it. The eco-transition is a necessity. It has to happen. There are people who argue against it, who question it, and say, no, we should stay dependent on coal and oil. But that's not the message that we need to be sending out. The transition has to happen. A world of green energy is one of rich in challenges, but I'd rather that over us being dependent on coal and oil. However, one point was raised, it's a very interesting one, by Mr. Wisniewskas from Lithuania on the cost for the environment of electric vehicles, which is a genuine issue. They're not e-cars or e-vehicles are not zero emissions. They're not clean. They're not green. We think they are when we're driving them, but the pollution is elsewhere. They're only as clean as the metals that are making them up. They're only as clean as the electricity fueling them or topping the battery. I would rather. Yes, I prefer a world of electric vehicles over the internal combustion engine, but what kind of pollution are we creating? We're polluting the soils, we're polluting the waters and other things. So there are plenty of challenges that we need to be honest about in terms of the getting to the truth, the ecological truth behind what goes into these new products. Those are fresh challenges.
So a point which has often been repeated in terms of energy dependency on Russia and Ukraine, and this was mentioned by Mr. Montouget, amongst others, but Mr. Erkins, Mr. Sonkello, and Mr. Olivero. So it's not just about dependency on Russian oil or gas, but it's also dependency on some very strategic metals. Russia produces palladium. It produces 10% nickel, and the prices of nickels have soared over the last weeks because there's a risk that nickel is less exported to Europe. Ukraine is a potential producer of lithium. We've seen a company, an Australian company, European Lithium it's called, and it's now positioned on a huge deposit of lithium, which is in the Donbass region of Ukraine, and they are going to start operations by the end of the year. Of course, this will not take place, and that doesn't mean to say that our dependency and our supply of metals has been somewhat weakened, because this is just a potential operation that could take place. But this is just to show you how many of these minerals exist in Ukraine, and of course, not benefiting from Ukrainian lithium makes us very weak in terms of supply. There was also another challenge in terms of energy, and that is social tensions concerning the higher prices of energy and the need to have economic energy transition which is fairer. Let me go back to something which struck us all in France and perhaps in Europe. That was the yellow vests. When they demonstrated in the streets in France, they were complaining about the price of petrol. But why was the price of petrol so high? That was because we had to pay for energy transition. So this was the first social crisis concerning the energy transition. So this is how I interpret it anyway, just to tell you that there is a risk in terms of energy transition which may not be all that balanced. It benefits some over others, so we'll have winners and losers, and this may generate new social crises. And yet there are solutions, and this is the last point that I want to make. So having mines in Europe, so in your different presentations, you talked about the potential of mining in Europe and the need and the obligation, I would even say, to develop what we call responsible mines. Clean mines, of course, don't exist. A mine will always be dirty, but you can have a more responsible type of mining. And this was raised by Mr. Rybarski, Mr. Oprea, Mr. Otto, and Mr. Pavic. So, and I forgot to say that the social tensions we're talking about were raised by others. Now, in terms of mines in Europe, there's a huge potential there. Europe can already start producing lithium, and it could produce rare earths. It could extract copper and iron, which it already does. So there is a potential, but our mining culture has disappeared. It disappeared a long time ago. But also we have to think about the social acceptability. The mining potential does exist, but how can we extract? So this is the difference between theory and practice. So in the Finistère in France, we discovered a lithium mine and a lithium deposit, but nobody wants to extract lithium because to put it into an electric car. So the issue is not necessarily to know if the resource exists theoretically and geologically, but the question is to see if there's enough social acceptability of mines so that we are able to move in that direction. I had the good fortune a couple of weeks ago to have lunch with the chairman of Anglo American, and he said that this issue of social acceptability by the people is a key challenge for the future of mining activities. And I think that this is the real nitty-gritty. It's not about ecology, so we have enough minerals for the future, but as we kind of dig deeper, we will discover other deposits of minerals as well. The question is the bottleneck concerning social acceptability of the surrounding populations. Mining would allow us to have more sustainable supply. Another point that was raised, and this is the last but one point, and this is recycling. This was talked about by Mr. Olson, Mr. Demersmaker, and also Madame Nardi. So the issue of recycling is something which is key. You mentioned this, but the issue of metals, and this is the only business where the second-hand material costs more than the new material because it's so expensive to recycle these raw materials, so that it's much cheaper to use new ones. So how can I invest in a recycling infrastructure for this or that metals tomorrow? So we talked about Flanders, which used to be a leader in terms of recycling, but we have to decide what metals we want to invest in and as competitively as possible. So of course this requires huge investment, and so this means that we have to rely on one metal for the next 10-20 years because these metals become profitable after 10-20 years. So who knows whether lithium will be profitable in 10-20 years? What about cobalt and the rare earths? We're living in a world of disruption. But disruption, paradoxically, is a brake, is an obstacle to innovation. It's difficult to make such a long-term, heavy investment and be able to say, okay, I'm trusting the markets and this product has an economic future. Just to tell you that how difficult it is, the difficulty in terms of being more competitive than the primary raw materials sector. This is also a huge issue. We have to trust the markets to recycle and valorize the material. And this is also very difficult if you look at the highs and lows, very strong variations in terms of price when it comes to raw materials, primary materials. So we have to be competitive on an economic scale. So there are long-term policies which need to be implemented, which of course require an official raising of prices through labels, through tax measures in terms of the value of these secondary materials, so that in the long term they are better valorized than they are currently and more competitive compared to raw materials. This is a role of the state. And something else that was raised by Mr. Muniz from Portugal was the issue of deep sea mining, extracting metals from the ocean. Now, yes, there are huge reserves of these metals in the sea. So you can always find metals somewhere, and France has one of the largest marine territories in the world, and Portugal as well knows the importance of the seas. So it is a potential. But personally speaking, dear parliamentarian, I have to say, so I am in favor of having mines in Europe, but I would be against mines or exploration of the sea. So because when I saw these wonderful images of the Paris Accord, there was a kind of consensus and a philosophy around this idea that we were going to reduce the human footprint. So here we're talking about extracting metals in the Pacific, for example, so that we can have these electric SUV cars. So if we do this, if we extend the hand of human beings and its impact on the environment, aren't we, at the end of the day, going counter to this energy transition, which was to limit our environmental impact? So it's not for economic reasons or environmental reasons that I am against it. It's for a symbolic reason, because I think that if we go beyond that threshold, then we're at the same time we're trying to live better, but with less. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pitron. I think you managed to summarize things very deftly. Now, I think that the next step is very important as well. So this is the lunch hour. You can leave by the doors at the back of the room, and you'll be accompanied to the restaurant. This is where you had a dinner yesterday evening. So see you in a moment, after lunch.